Hello, everybody. It's Laura Eisenhower. I am so thrilled to be here today with the legend, Leigh J. McCloskey. I have not done an interview with him since 2021, but I follow his page really closely. And it's so great to have you. Thank you, Leigh, for being with me today.
Thank you for having me, and it's delightful to be back with you, Laura.
Oh, well,
So,
thank you. Thank you so much. So, I'm going to share some words about him before we get started. So, Leigh's creative life unfolds as a true hero's journey, shaped by a lifelong devotion to restoring meaning, dignity, and depth to the human story through art, myth, and philosophy. A natural polymath, his love of history, poetry, music, theater, and the Hermetic tradition culminated in the monumental 17-year creation of Tarot Revisioned, a masterwork widely recognized for its visionary genius. From there, Leigh continued as a creative archaeologist of the unconscious, mapping inner worlds through art, including his 12-year Universe as Organism painting series and the seminal Phoenix Arise oil painting, which later revealed fractal, holographic, DNA-like mandalas through its card form, which I've been able to see in person. Over decades, Leigh created deeply personal illuminated works, including the hand-bound Codex Tor books and a modern grimoire for Shadow of the Vampire, which famously toured with the Rolling Stones. Following the events of 9/11, grief catalyzed a profound artistic transformation, giving rise to channeled multidimensional watcher language. This living improvisational visual language eventually crystallized into a fixed three-dimensional environment within his home studio, the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul, THOTHS Library. THOTHS, everyone. A modern cave painting that tells the timeless story of what it means to be human and why it matters. While publicly known as a successful actor, Leigh viewed the film industry as a patron that quietly supported his deeper inner work. In 1981, he and his wife Carla established their Malibu home, Olandar, which became the nucleus of what he called the emerging Renaissance. For more than 4 decades, Olandar has hosted thousands of gatherings, study groups, and events devoted to Western inner traditions, philosophy, and art, and today stands as a living crucible of inspired humanity. And I just have to say, when I lived in Ventura, California, I think it was around 2010, it was the first time I'd been to your home, went to quite a number of the meetings. On Tuesdays, which was profound. It was life-changing when I met you, and it still is. Interacting with your page, seeing everything that you post every day, the incredible videos that you do. I mean, the thing is, you speak to the soul, which is everything. And I just want to start off asking you about this. Looking across the arc of your life, from acting to Tarot Revisioned to the vast symbolic environments you've created, how do you feel your journey has evolved over time, and what has remained constant at its core?
the constant at its core has been the infernal drive to absolutely not give up, not quit, but to continue really like an archaeologist to dig ever more deeply. But what's interesting, because I've reached a period in my life where it is more like the mosaic is beginning to show itself, that all of the layering that I wondered why, what was the point? And if I were to simplify all of it down to what the point was, it was that we need to return home, that the missing key is intimate, it's intimacy, that we've lost a sense of self-worth. And the reclaiming of this led to this environment, the hieroglyph of the human soul. And its message is you must put yourself back in the picture. You see the mirror behind me. This is the mirror of unique identity and self-reflection. And when someone visits and they take the walkabout, the tour, I have them come to the mirror of self-reflection and unique identity because it helps us understand that self-reflection, our journey of who do we think we are, has taken thousands of years. And the seat here next to me, this story of Eve's chair, is the story that this chair has been empty for thousands of years because we took a journey a long, long time ago, asking what does it mean to be human? And just like this painting of mine turned back to first technology, it's just paint and storytelling, but it reveals a most important key now, home. If we need to know who we are, we need to find a way back to why it matters and why being human is not something we escape, because we never have, but it's something we apply. And this is the alchemy, this is the art. We take the trauma, we take the anguish, we take the difficulty, and we transform it into something we can share with another. And so our spirits don't keep sinking, but our sunken spirits lift one another because we sing together, we share. This is what I've always loved about theater and the arts, is that we're not there to correct others. We're there to inspire others, because an inspired conversation is worth its weight in gold. And when you said about Tuesday nights, it's now 45 years I've held these discussion groups in my home every Tuesday night, and for many years Thursday night. So that's thousands upon thousands of discussion groups. And I really do feel, if you think about all of us, what was the message you sent to consciousness? That you cared, that you found it meaningful, that even if no one else cared, you did? If no one else showed up, you said, I'll show up? That's about a relationship. That's not about an entitlement. That's about becoming worthy of what we seek to know. And that's why a lot of my work has to do with the Grail, and it has to do with Christos and the story of the hieroglyph of the human soul, Sophia and Eve and wisdom. Because we're not about learning something new. We're about trying to awaken from a long period of having forgotten. And our arts will remind us, because that's the part of the human story that seeks to be generous with each other. That's my 2 cents.
I love it so much. Oh my gosh. So, do you feel myth provides a way of living inside of meaning rather than simply describing it?
If we understand what Joseph Campbell and other teachers of myth were really trying to say, is that we study myth, we talk about it in the abstraction, we apply it psychologically, but we miss the point that he was making, that one's life is the hero's journey. Your dragons might not be scaly and large and full of fire, but your dragons might be low self-esteem, self-hatred, a sense of futility and meaninglessness. And believe me, those are very great dragons that we encounter along our human journey. And that's why I do feel that my work has really proven over these many years that we're only moving now into a time of mythic reintegration. And I say that because my work, and you can see the room behind me, really comes from that question of how do we apply myths in an age that doesn't believe in myth, it believes in fantasy. See, myth isn't really about one's ego. It's about the way we navigate our experience and whether or not it cultivates wisdom, it cultivates capacity. Fantasy just iterates and reiterates the same proposition over and over again and keeps a person forever, in a sense, in a fantasy, not in a mythic story, because the mythic story insists upon personal engagement. And that's why the art here is about the question of, in a non-mythic, a non-symbolical culture, how do we reinvigorate the myths? As Joseph Campbell said, the artists of every generation must reinvigorate the myths. And what did he mean by that? That the myth is not something that, let's say, in a study of psychology or a study of archaeology or mythology, is a study of something. Myth is the triggering of something. It takes us from an inactive state into a co-creative state. This is what I learned from the archetypes when I worked on the tarot, is that you can study the tarot, you can talk about it, but once you enter it, it's a bit like an actor saying, if I talk to you about Hamlet as an intellectual concept, we can have a very interesting conversation. But if you play Hamlet, it's a very different conversation, because it's the one that comes through experience. It comes through the body revealing the character. It's not from the outside in, it's from the inside out. And so much of what's happened here is from the inside out, because it is saying that if we can find our way back home, not to what's wrong with the neighbor or what's wrong with the world or why we're angry at the television or whatever it might be, but the question of what matters to you. The story here is not what's wrong with the world, but what do you love? What do you care about? Because the mythic, and Joseph Campbell said it really well. He said, in myth, there is no tragedy. And you think about it, what does that mean? There's no tragedy. What he was trying to say is that we personalize a storm. If a storm comes up and it takes out houses, we think that it's somehow an act that was against us, when in fact it was a natural act that was asking us to adapt and to change. And this is what myth does. It insists upon transformation. It doesn't comfort. It makes us aware that our reality, our world, is very alchemical, very much like Job in the Bible. The question, no matter what, remains, in spite of everything, will you still love? And that's a big one. And that's the heart of myth.
Oh my gosh. I mean, people are looking, behind you and seeing this tremendous landscape. And I mean, how did this emerge through you? Were these concepts of the Christos and Sophia strong in your life before all this? Like, take us into
No,
how this all began and the evolution in the visual sense and what came through.
I actually feel it was because I followed the path of an actor. I mean, my father was a painter. So if your father's a painter, you don't think of yourself as a painter because it's your dad and he's the painter, not you. But he gave me a gift as an actor. He'd always say, look, when you can no longer talk about something, paint it. Apply a different tool. And that was really brilliant advice because when I was at Juilliard studying acting, it really opened up this other side. I didn't think of myself as an artist. I thought of myself as an actor, which was very freeing because I didn't have an identity. Oh, I have to play that part culturally. I didn't even assume it culturally. So it freed me very much. And as you said in the introduction, that over the years as a professional actor, it really did become that I started to recognize it as this really fortuitous patron. I mean, I couldn't control Hollywood or where the destiny of my career would go or what opportunities would arise or wouldn't arise. But I realized that it was creating a condition where I didn't have to take my art on the same platform, meaning I didn't have to convince an art world. I didn't have to convince critics. I didn't have to say, hey, I'm an artist. I've showed up. You got to take me seriously. I worked privately. And now, 45 years later, I realize the genius behind it because when you work privately, you're not even in a dialogue of, well, what do you think? And I often tell artist friends of mine, I say, look, what this taught me is you cannot ask, if you're an artist, what do you think of my work? You have to ask them, what does my work make you think? Because the first is just a critique. And if they do it in orange, say, well, do it in orange. But the other is a conversation. And that's when the ideas start to free us. They start to trigger us. And we start to once again be engaged in interesting dialogue that frees us imaginatively and creatively. And that's why the whole sort of journey of becoming an artist was what my dad had suggested, a way of asking questions. So I reached a place with a character where I was stuck, and I used paint really just to find violence, to find the sense of rage. And when those two things came together, I started to have a type of epiphany. It wasn't, oh, now I'm going to be a great artist. It was the relationship of emotion, paint, pigment, and tools. And what acting had given me was a tool of access to the psyche, an access to stepping into other characters, to oftentimes play someone who was my opposite and had opposite values, opposite thoughts than I did. So mine was not to judge it, but to step into that character. And so from the inside of that character, I would learn a great deal about how someone else sees the universe, sees the world, their values, what they're based upon. And so that became a type of education about the psyche. But I never thought it would lead to the tarot, which it did. And the tarot, I never thought I had a calling. I didn't feel like, oh, it's something like when I was 14, I looked at the tarot and I said, I got to make me one of those. I never had that feeling. It was much more a chance encounter with Ed Steinbrecher, who wrote a book called The Inner Guide Meditation. And he asked me if I could create images for the tarot because he'd seen my work, which is highly symbolical. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, how hard could that be? That's when in the Hermetic tradition, you are tricked onto your path because for 17 years, I bled this thing into existence. It's not like, oh, I just took other drawings. It was a completely original origin all work. And because I had, in a way, not assumed it would be difficult, but then I couldn't quit it, so to speak. It became monstrously difficult because it was going into a type of relationship with the psyche, with symbolism, with conversation inwardly that was awakening some very ancient tool sets. It's the only way I can say it. See, everything for me was as if I was made blissfully ignorant of what I was doing on one level, meaning that if I had seen the entire show, I wouldn't have believed it was up to me to produce the books, the plot, the set, all of it. And I do. I feel that was the great gift, is that I didn't have an ambition to do something. I was simply responding to the fact that if I didn't make some sense out of what was going on, because people say be yourself, I was like, well, which one? Or the sense of what do we do with trauma? What do we do with anguish? What do we do with that which cannot be expressed? Somebody says, well, how are you doing? And you think, well, like the Adagio from Mahler's Fifth Symphony. I mean, what do you say? It's sort of like fine, good, and we stay on a very, in a sense, polite level of consciousness. And for me, I was, and I think because of the setup, this odd double life, that when I was given the gift of Dallas, which allowed me to move into this house in 1980, um, I opened my home as a font of discussion. For 25 years, it was a theosophy discussion group. It was also a Western inner tradition group. We looked at Jung, looked at Campbell and Blake, and all sorts of influences on us. And I was opening my home and to just anybody that was curious. I said it was the gathering of the curious. It wasn't a think tank. I wasn't trying to have everyone of a certain political stripe there. As a matter of fact, 45 years ago, I said we will not be talking politics on Tuesday nights because politics makes us small, it makes us angry. And I want ideas that actually liberate us, to remind us that we're way more interesting than the political class of mind. We really are. But I realized that part of the metaphor literally was this was my home. And I thought, oh, what's the message there? It's saying that the things that really matter, even if the world doesn't care about them, if you do, then make your house, your home, your altar. Make it your garden. Begin to say, well, where do I want to start my story from? What's wrong with the world? Or what's right with those I love? And that's why this hieroglyph of the human soul began on 9/11, 2001, when the towers came down. And why it is an extraordinary moment is that, a bit like falling off the scaffolding, think about the Sistine Chapel. Everything's over our heads, everything's enormous. We're shouting at God and the Pope, and, our ideas are great. And then on 9/11, these twin towers of money and God, these false erections of Babel, come toppling down. And we're left in this room on our knees, on a linoleum floor in a human scale ranch style home. In other words, we're not in extraordinary space, we're in ordinary space. And I started to realize that's the human condition. We think, oh, it's about being golden, but actually we're linoleum. We're ordinary. So our curse isn't about being extraordinary. It's about what do we do with why am I ordinary? But here the revelation becomes that's the gift. What you think of as ordinary is actually a liberation from having to defend all of the different ideas and stories that have gone before. We're finally home. We finally come full circle. And why I say this is so extraordinary and symbolically true here is that I have an upstairs studio and a downstairs studio. The 20th century, I created the Tarot Revision. It took 17 years from really this story from about mid-1985 till the turn of the century. And I created the book. But then I looked at the book, and my world archetype, we think of the World Trade Center, is dated 9/11, 1986. So it's telling us that there's a marker, and this is Saturn actually, symbolically, having to do with structure. If you think of changing the structure away from the outer and the false erection, meaning the false sense of I have more than you do, be obedient, collapses. And we're left saying, well, what do we do then? What do we do? We're on our knees. And that's why the 9/11 element and the thoughts element are THOTHS, because I was told when this began that the last flood was water. This flood is information, and that I was to build an ark. And I thought, an ark? But it said not for physical waters, but for mental waters, because the footprint of who we are as humans is becoming vague. We're forgetting the nobility of our own purpose. We're really and truly believing that we are meaningless. And that is the greatest poverty imaginable, because it keeps us from ever returning home. So think about a tarot journey in the 20th century that comes full circle, that it comes home here. So we have the Book of Thoth. Some people say Thoth, the Book of Thoth downstairs. And then we have the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul that began on 9/11/2001. And the acronym for the Hieroglyph of the Human Soul is THOTHS. So it's THOTHS Library. And that's the studio above. So as above, so below. But this is my home, and there's a middle section. And this is as above, so below, but in between my heart. In other words, that if I love, I don't exalt in stories that are about leaving or escaping. This is my home. On 9/11, it was about my daughters and my wife. It was saying, I have to tell them why being human matters, why it's noble, why we're not a mistake. And even if my neighbors don't agree, or if the world says, no, 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 you're wrong, at least where I live, this will be the truth I cultivate. And now, 25 years later, it's really cultivated. And it came from the watchers. The watcher language is what it's written in. So when you asked, did I expect to encounter Christ, Sophia, Kuan Yin? No, I didn't. Lilith as well. I did not expect all of this mythos to pour through me, but it did. And that's why I do. I feel like Campbell and Carl Jung, they'd be very happy with this, because they say, you see, it's true. It's not a personal relationship to myth, but to be human, we're woven of these myths. And to make sense of ourselves, we must make sense of our mythic stories, but not as a study, as an environment in which we dwell. So our question is now, like, how do we do that? I say, you don't need to do it big. Don't do spectacle. That's what everyone's doing. They're trying to, in a sense, be louder and louder and louder, saying less and less and less, go faster and faster, nowhere. But this is, no, come full circle. And in a world that is shouting, whisper. Because people that are meant to hear you, even if you're whispering, will. People that are shouting cannot hear a thing. And the world is shouting. And all we're doing, Laura, is whispering. And I feel like that's where truly the feminine side of consciousness emerges. We think we can take relationship. We can be so smart and build machinery and go quicker and quicker. But without love, there is no ingress. This is what my magus, it's not a magician in my tarot, it's a magus. It's a seed. Magus says, you enter the arcana because of the questions you ask or do not ask. And if you think of fear and death as being your question or revenge, you're not welcome. You must be that which cultivates life. And that's the first principle, not death. Death comes when we become mathematicians of consciousness, because we figure out statistically why doing away with someone else makes sense. But the mother, the archetypes, they say everything is essential to the weave of the whole. Everything is whole and holographic. So if you take away, it's like taking off your fingers and thinking you'll have more dexterity. We must resolve the story from within and how we live the story, not how the neighbor lives the story, but how we do. And that's why my notes on the emerging Renaissance, which I wrote 22 years ago, I think is still fundamentally important. What do you pay attention to? So whatever our sacred texts are, what do you pay attention to and why? You know?
Oh, yes, so much. Oh my gosh. And I'm just looking behind you. And as you talk about Lilith and Sophia, and just remembering touring through here multiple times, many times, the one painting behind you, isn't Lilith behind like that whole thing?
Oh, yes, she's right. Actually, because you can see me, you'll see that behind this painting. Can you see it? Yes, you can, I think.
Yeah.
And then we reveal behind the blossom she who is hidden.
Yeah.
The and this can, is she glaring too much? I can't see.
It's glaring just a little bit. Yeah, we can see it pretty good.
So everything in this story, though, about the she who is hidden, that another remarkable element here in this, as you know, is that with 3D glasses, this becomes multidimensional. So if we think of that as a message, a fixed multidimensional environment, we don't build spaceships, we build mind ships. There's no there in a hologram. That's the lesson here. If we think about our ancient sites, they were about creating residence for these archetypal energies, because the point of amplification is not here to there, it's alignment. This is what this is about. It's an act of alignment. It's an act of the forgotten element that the sacred remembers, is that if you want to cultivate, you must create place. And this is one of the things that I say to people when they're here. I say, look, in your home, if you have just some place, little altar, but this is where you tell the universe you love her. You love it. You love it. You say, this matters to me. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I believe. I believe in the meaning, even if I can't perceive why, that I'm not part of something that makes no sense, even if it doesn't make any sense, but part of something remarkable and profound. And you know what? These energies start to pay attention to you because you honor them. We are very arrogant. Like we think we are so smart in this culture, like we can build technology. Technology is not the answer. Ideas are the answer. Technology imbued with ideas will become astounding, but we also have to recognize our role in terms of what I say here. My lesson here as a custodian of wonder, as a custodian of thought, is that we exist in a 24-hour-a-day responsibility. We don't have a Saturday seminar consciousness, meaning that I can get out of it when you're dealing with what's going on at home. You have to deal with structure, you have to deal with imagination, and you have to deal with domestic responsibility. And those are three different rooms, three different conversations, but we've developed them. That's what this is all getting at. Art really isn't about the artist. It's about what does it tell us about consciousness? Why has this manifested? And I think that's what helps us realize that what is deeply messaging at this point are not the things that are obvious. Those are, in a way, the alchemical elements that are forcing us to change how we assume, what we think. But it's trying to bring us back, as it does here, back into the sense of an arc, that your home, your heart, is that arc. What truly matters to you? When you ask that question, well, then what do I love? And if human meaning depends upon me investing it with at least the chance that it's meaningful, then let me do my part. Not wait, not have this entitled sense of prove it and I'll follow it. We're not followers. We're organisms. We're cultivating consciousness. And the phoenix arise behind it, as you know, Laura, literally blossoms. It flowers. So when a fractal of creation flowers, it's saying that's what we are. We're here to flower. We're here to blossom. We're here to open. But here's a very subtle question that my home asks. If you're here to do that, where do you do it? And I say when people visit here, I say, do it where you can close the door and say, this matters to me. If it matters to you, great. But this matters to me. We then start to cultivate an intimate relationship with these energies. And I think that's why in my writing with Eve, when I was working on Eve, Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, a romance in two parts, that I published in 2004, flowed out as I worked on Eve. I didn't make up the story. I didn't, it was such a beautiful retelling of Genesis. I never would have thought, oh, I'm going to retell Genesis. I would have thought, where somebody smites you with a lightning bolt. So but that's what it led to. All of this, in a way, deep archaeology of of consciousness has led to, I'm sorry, missed the button. But it's that realization that so many of the things that we want to address, we've not created place for. We've not actually, and if you think of a relationship, said, I want you to feel safe. And I really do feel like a lot of the energies I deal with, I ended up making them feel safe because I wouldn't betray them. I wouldn't sell them out. I would say, if you want to know, come and visit, spend time. But this is not art in the sense it doesn't illustrate anything. It's literally the manifestation of these deep relationships. And even Eve told me, because I was very frustrated. I said, why can't I find you? And she said, because this is our time together. This is our relationship. Beauty is not optical. It doesn't come because you see it. It comes because you feel it. And as you feel me more and more present, you'll find I become more and more beautiful. And when our relationship has reached a point of maturity, we'll be able to stand and see each other whole and uniquely. And that's what happened with the story of Adam Reborn. And I thought, yeah, if the story's not beautiful, why are we asking ourselves to attend it as though it is? We do have choice. Thing I've never understood. You're making up the world according to what you assume. And if it's miserable, then why don't you assume something a little different? Give yourself, and this is where I just feel like a lot of my work, and I even wrote my book, The Etiquette of Energy, a book of inner standing, not understanding, and the etiquette of energy, a call to remember the sacred role of the artist. These are recent titles that I've been working on. And I feel that they're really getting at it. It's all about etiquette on all levels. It's about how we treat energy, not only outside of ourselves, but inside of ourselves. And from esotericism, the ring pass not, or the compression is that until within ourselves, we liberate ourselves, we redeem ourselves, we will remain forever burdened by the things we believe to be true that actually aren't true. They're weights we carry until we relinquish them. That's the myth. The fantasy is you can go to a psychologist and go, well, I'm done. It's like, no, it's way more living sculpture time. You have to learn how to let go. That's why, now I say about my art, it didn't come because I was Mr. Happy. It came because of a lot of different engagements with trauma. And
Mm.
that's what, that's our tool.
Oh yeah.
So,
Gosh. So incredible. And that's the thing, there's trauma loops that people get in because they externalize everything. Whereas for you, trauma has brought you closer to home, closer to yourself. And, this incredible soulscape that has emerged. I mean, you went through the fires in Malibu. I mean, you were right in the heart of it. Can you talk to us about that and where your art,
yeah,
what
that
expressed
was,
your art after that?
yeah, that was 2018. It was November 9th, and then it lasted for 20 days. I grew up about 2 miles from where I live, and I had been trained that you do not leave, that when the fire comes, that you will not have support. The fire department will not be there. Your water will run out, and the electricity will go off. And all of those things did happen. And Carla and I stayed. And I had never seen a fire like this, though, because um, it was behaving in ways that were sentient. They were living. They were awake and terrifying in a deep sense. Because when I walked out, the fire just really it had not come over the ridge the way it had. No, there was no backup, and it just burned. And it was like being in Dante's Inferno. It was really a type of apocalyptic blaze. And I walked out. I was just trying to get, because we're near the ocean, so I was trying to get things into the car that I could take in the car if I had to leave. I wasn't going to leave, but I wanted to get as much as I could. But the thing hit so fast that even became impossible. But I was walking out with a smaller painting of mine downstairs out the French doors, and it was like walking and seeing a dragon. I walked and I looked, and it was pitch black outside, except for these falling golden and red embers. It was quite beautiful in a very like Stephen King kind of way. It was like, because it was creepy as well. And I hear inwardly, "Are you staying or leaving?" And I shout at this point, "Staying." And inwardly I hear that's all I needed to know. And it was, talk about a dragon. It was like a dragon, because it went from being absolute still to suddenly like a light went on and the thing just turned like this. And it was a fire tornado. And it was like the heart of it. And that as it said, it almost like swished its tail and jumped over the house. And that's when it became this truly extraordinary experience, because it lasted for days and days and days. And it would reignite, it would come back, and it would not die. And the second night when I was going out and trying to put out spot fires, trying to this again, almost like a Stephen King story, this energy wraps itself around me and it says, "Tell me what you hate, and I'll burn down your house," like that. And it was like, Jesus, tell me what you hate, and I'll burn down your house. Then it says that this is the apocalypse, that the apocalypse doesn't happen all at once. And I thought, oh, then it says that there is a drought in the human heart. The heart has grown brittle and dry, knowing what it hates and forgetting what it loves. I am that fire that will burn this brittleness from within. I will bring humankind to their knees. And it was, and then COVID hit shortly after that. Notre Dame burst into flames shortly after that. So it was wherever anger was being expressed, the fires were exploding. And that's when the sentience really hit me. After the fire, something ancient in me awakened. I became very fierce, is the only way I can put it. Really, because it was release your inner animal, meaning that instinctual creature. I don't think I thought for 20 days. I was completely instinctual. And it's so funny. I saw myself, I took a shower after, like, I don't know how many days. It was like a friend let me, and I got out of the mirror and I looked like some 800-year-old knight, like really that had had just exhausted, covered with mud, and it felt that way. It felt like, oh, this is the dragon. And that's what it said. We will be experiencing the water dragon and the fire dragon and the earthquake dragon. And it announced that in the arcana that the four horsemen of the apocalypse are death, temperance, the tower, and judgment. So all of that's what I do. It took me into a different register and then with the Palisades fire, then last year, actually, I think today, last year, it happened again. And people can't understand just how devastating these fires are. I mean, they are very alive. They're very, very prescient, meaning that we really have a sense of they are something living. They're not something that is just an objective force. And as a matter of fact, 2 o'clock in the morning on the first night, I'm out in the garden and I hear inwardly, it says, "Do you feel everyone's prayers for you and Carla, my wife, and Olandar, my home?" And I did. It wasn't like I was making it. It was like, because as an actor, you kind of like want to keep it, the improvisation going. So yeah, I feel it. It's not like I don't feel anything. But this was really like my dad's dying, where I was not making anything up. And I literally felt a prayer field. And I thought, wait a minute. And that's when it struck me that in a time of great trauma, when you don't have any defenses, you feel a very different level of energy, especially if you're not sure you're going to survive the night. And that was the thing. It felt like angels at my back. I even felt like a breath being breathed over the house, like a dome. And it wasn't a breath like, oh, now be conceited, it's a guarantee, but more like everything is in motion. Keep it go, in other words, keep almost like a focus, like a martial art moment. Keep the focus. And that's what I also discovered. I wrote after the fire, stand your ground, because fire teaches you that no one will show up. Know where you are. You cannot fight the big fire, but you can know where you are. And I started to think like a siege of dragons. If you're on the north wall and I'm on the south wall, I can't know what you're doing on the north wall. I expect you to stand your ground and you deal with what you must deal with, and I'll do. And that's really what I was very saddened by, because this last fire in Malibu, with the Woolsey fire that hit us, was so few neighbors were there. Almost everyone fled. And it was it was a different energy. It was like, because when I was a kid, that's when you met your neighbors. It was a disaster, and everyone
Okay.
rolled up their sleeves. That's the kind of guy I've always been. I was raised by that kind of parents too, you know. Need some help, you roll up your sleeves, you get it done. My dad would always say, you want friends, don't talk politics and don't talk religion.
Very wide.
Yeah, very wise dad, because
And you grew up
that's
in
all people do these days. And you think, oh God, no, don't go there. It's
oh,
like,
oh, right.
yeah.
And you were raised in Malibu, right? So,
I was raised 2 miles from it. This is actually the house of the first girlfriend I had in kindergarten. So it's really almost incestuous. No, I grew up 2 miles from here on Bush Drive.
oh
So,
my gosh. And wasn't there a glowing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, no, please, please.
Oh, a glowing red orb, reminiscent of the biblical wormwood you were talking about from that
Oh,
fire?
yeah, I actually wrote about that, and I photographed it too, because about 15 years ago, on actually around January, New Year's Eve, I had photographed two orbs, but my camera was, it was like all over the place. So it was like I just sort of let that go. But what was very, very strange was that on the time of the fire, this dragon that I had felt during the Woolsey fire was very present with the Palisades fire again. And a lot of my interests are sacred texts, prophetic texts, and the fascination with the Book of Revelation, which is that in the Revelation there is what is called wormwood, which is the red comet that enters, really as a pronouncement of like, you thought it was bad. Now, no, sort of a pronouncement of whoops. So I look up, and the fire is and I see entering on the third night of the Palisades fire a red comet coming in, seemingly with a halo coming into the atmosphere. And I'm thinking, oh, and I immediately go to the wormwood thinking, that's not a good sign. But what was even stranger was that it didn't come in. I thought I was trying to see where it would hit, and it didn't hit. It slowed down and it turned to the right and then went out over the ocean and disappeared behind a cloud bank. And I got my camera just intuitive and ran. I anchored my arms, and then it came out of the clouds, the cloud bank, toward me. And for the first 2 seconds, I'm like, cool, it's coming to, oh, it's coming toward me. That feeling of like, I'm not sure that's a good idea. And but then it lasts for 7 seconds, and then it turned off, like turning off a light switch. And I went back and I slowed down the film, and because it was a pulse that was coming, and you can see it pulsing. And then you look, and there's the sort of the classical shape of the UFO, the little mothership looking thing, and the alien with the big eyes, the elongated head, phantoms, all these different shapes in it. And that's when it struck me. I thought, wait a minute, we're organisms. Like think of a frog, right? You think of a flower. It doesn't know personally how to blossom or when to lose its tail or come out of the. It's going to actually be in this. Oh, see that one? That if you go back, that one you just did, that one, that shape really felt like it's because you'll see that it's shape shifting geometries or geometrical shapes. That what happens is that it will go into like a shape like that, And then, oh, that was the cloud also. That was the cloud the night before that did not move for over an hour over our house. And I thought, what is that? I filmed it because I thought something was going to come out of it. Nothing did, but it was the strangest thing. So that was the night before, this stationary cloud for about an hour. And it was also, I have to say, the feeling was just such a strange, otherworldly feeling because with the fire and everything, there's just you can feel it. It's in the air. It's in the vibe, so to speak. But I started to realize that we are a hieroglyph. This is what all my work is about. And if we think about orbs as not being that being part of a deeper sentience, a type of consciousness that is in relationship with us, because I thought, and why I thought it was interesting when the thing shut off, is it goes from a type of geometrical, pinkish geometrical organic shape. And then as soon as the light switch bit shows up, it collapses into what looks like a drop of water. And I started thinking about ectoplasm. And then it just sort of like a drop of water disappears. And I'd also been, as you know, inundated by orbs in photographs in the early
Gosh,
part of the 20th century.
oh, those are
And
incredible.
they are because they're in geometrical
Out of the mirror,
relationship.
though, right? The mirror?
Out of the mirror, only in the mirror. I mean, the thing is, there are pictures I have where the orbs are only in the mirror. They're not on the outside of the mirror.
And then there was
So
something coming out of Phoenix Arise, right?
Phoenix Arise, you see them spiraling out. And then the circle, the mandala there, that's what is created from the Phoenix Arise. And you see all of these orbs. And I started to realize that what's happening in all of this, if you think of like a crop circle or this, or is that we want to know what something is, and then we can go, oh, phew, I know, and I'm done with it. The reason none of these things leave a signature is they're not functioning on that level. Why orbs aren't, in a way, collapsible into we know what it is because we think about everything that in a way creates an inability to actually know something. In other words, it's also maybe the knowing of what we're looking at is not in a language we actually even understand. Like we're only seeing part of the event in this dimension. This is very important because what is being cultivated is a curiosity, not just sort of random, like, oh, I want to know about this, but a type of curiosity that's soul deep. Like, why, if I can't figure out who done it, maybe that's not the key of who. Maybe the question is more of a symbolical sense, like when we're dream interpreting. If you talk to someone, well, that's your dream. So obviously this has meaning, because but when we look at objective reality, we have a tendency to go opaque and say, oh, there's no meaning, there's no relevance. And what I've learned over the years is no, everything has a type of mentoring capacity, but we have to learn its language. This is why the sages of old, when they said the flight of the birds, the flowers, they weren't talking metaphorically. They were saying that if you speak with a flower, you must speak flower, not English on. In other words, we learn, and that's if you think about this is why acting or performing is very helpful in helping people get a sense of what it means. Because if you think about allowing something to move you rather than trying to figure something out, we go through like in the way that music, like you put on a song, you think about like satisfaction, you start dancing, the body doesn't need to be told anything. It's been triggered. And it's been triggered by this other way of receiving information. And that's what I feel is that even in my own work, if I were to say, because I'm 70 now, and I really feel there's an old alchemical engraving, and it's all these different severed body parts. But basically, the whole point in alchemy is it's the remembering. We remember ourselves. We put ourselves back together. And what I've discovered is the last part we put back on is our head, meaning that if we had this on first, we wouldn't do anything. And the reason we took it off was so that we would learn through the body. And we think about the three brains, the gut, the heart, and the head. People ask me about my work and they say, well, is it? And I say, look, it's not from hallucinogenics. It's not from optics. It's literally from, you would say, the gut mind moving through the heart up into the eyes, into the head. And that's why the stories I tell are not my imposing of my cleverness. Oh, I figured out a myth that you don't know. I'm more like the little kid that runs, Laura, you can't believe what the drawings are saying. But this always keyed me into why. It's really only in our culture that we've so reduced the relevance of the arts because we're a commodified, really, the accountants of the imagination have taken over. But I kind of feel like that is always the case because what we're talking about is a level where, like the flower blossoming, the plant has matured. You know, in other words, we can finally carry the implication of what is inside of us without it dissolving us. And this is why I really feel that a lot of people think about transhumanism, and I say we are not transhuman until we become human. And when we become human, we will recognize that we are divine. We are the human form divine. And the reason we slowed ourselves down was so that we made sure the foundation didn't leak. Otherwise, part of us would always be trying to escape, always being, I'm more significant than something else, and therefore I deserve special treatment. If you think of something that is a whole organism, it's a different lesson going on. And it's a lesson that we have been being taught for thousands of years. Be aware of what you invest your energy in. That's why the language of the Watchers that this is written in is an important part of the mystery. Because the Watchers, going back to the book of Enoch, have to do with everything from the fallen angels, but we realize that that was really sort of a different interpretation. Fallen not because they were bad, fallen because they chose to not allow the earth to be enslaved. But it wasn't to be enslaved immediately, it was over time that we've really grown an organism. Like that's the thing about the library here. I think about, all right, this is a painted cave. We've gone back to first technology, just paint and storytelling. But it's in a home with a library. And then you think about, well, what's the library? It's like the DNA. It says, if you want to know who you are, you must look at yourself as the human library, as the human DNA. You are a unique expression in the mirror of self-reflection. You are a unique blossom in terms of your sacred geometry. But who and what you are is a phoenix. And the phoenix is not born into time. A phoenix is born into creation. A phoenix is whole, holy, and holographic. Think about a question that asks us one question. When will you be able to accept that as true? And if you are a phoenix and you do accept it as true, what would be the difference as saying, oh no, there's no such thing. That's not me. Do you see? And this is a threshold event. It's a bit like stepping on stage and going, you're going to have to cross and take a breath and say, I'm into it. I step into this truth. I allow it to be. And then it begins to join us because we've given it place. And that's what this is about. My home is place. And to me, that's the missing key, the lost key, the McLost key, actually.
Oh my gosh. It's amazing how the words and the placements of the painting,
Yeah.
like the lower shelf, the higher shelf of Sophia's head. And
Yes, yes. Well, that's if you think about it, it's so funny because it's about humor. It's about, and I love Mothership. She says it's not enlightenment, it's enlighten up, breathe. You know, that my
love that.
revelations are in pink. You can't be angry at pink. And I thought it's we're angry about everything. You know, in that sense of like lighten up, breathe, create. And I do feel like that's what is so essential and why in many ways, comedians keep the psyche healthy because that's what, as a matter of fact, when I meditate deeply, I always know that I'm at my deepest point when my inner avatar is a stand-up comedian, my inner Robin Williams, basically. I mean, it's just,
And well, like, mm-hmm.
yeah. Of course, Robin's an old classmate of mine, so he's far more, but it's still that feeling of and as a matter of fact, I was sitting in the Phoenix chair when I hear just this exasperated voice in me saying, God, you humans, you try way too hard. It's not supposed to be this difficult. And I thought, yeah, what if that's really the mistake we're making? You know, in a sense, we've overcomplicated even our own psychology. And I think that's the simplicity here. It's trying to say, look, we're the technology. So we are that which we have, and we're being really treated like we are a machine rather than a quality of consciousness. And therefore it's I just feel it's a time of a lot of things, um, almost like a soul weariness, where it's not about battling against something as much as saying, well, there is this um, type of chaotic state, what then is the value of it? And I do think it is that almost like the AA where they say, what can you actually control? What do you have to sort of give to God? What do another it's starting to discern what it is and where it is we actually have the most responsibility. And I do believe that my work is that sense that we must begin with the responsibility, not to convince others, but to honor what matters to ourselves. And then we do become more like gardeners, which the alchemists used to call themselves celestial gardeners. And I always thought, how wonderful. In other words, it's not that one of us, but together we will create a conversation that inspires all of us. And
Right.
that is true to the work.
Right.
Yeah.
I always like to say like oneness is diversity and harmony and and that sovereignty, right? I mean, with what you're sharing, this emergence and this levity. I mean, wouldn't that also connect with the zero? The fool is
Oh, yeah.
the lightness of being, because it seems like the complexities are to keep that dependency bond alive so that we avoid these archetypes that are wanting to emerge, that if we block, it seems that is the root of a lot of struggles in our world. I mean, do you feel everybody has all these archetypes that if we were functioning in more authenticity, they would just emerge like organically instead of how we complicate things, like what you're saying?
In a way, yes, is a short answer to what you're saying. But I also feel that what tarot helps us with, and I always liken it to a piano, meaning that we begin to see the keys, we begin to see the characters, and understand that many times we think of these things outside of ourselves. But what this is trying to say is, look, this is why Labyrinth, why all of it wasn't about like it's different for you or for me, but when you walk it or I walk a labyrinth, it was that our pattern brain, this is a mandala, it was all knowledge that we are a hieroglyph. We are composed of these symbols and these sets. So that when we walked, let's say, in a geometrical garden, it amplified. It was like listening to Bach. We knew that it would amplify in a way reason, capacity for thought, but the same way as that if we want to stimulate talking about romance or love, we'd have a grotto going down to. And I started to see this a lot like we do in theater. Like if you create the right setting, in a way, you're creating permission for the actor to say, "Oh, well, yes, it's the 16th century. Thee, thy, and thou makes sense." And much of that, I think what's missing in our culture, and I really wished that it's the playfulness, meaning it's almost like it's not the belief, it's the suspension of disbelief that gives us permission to, in a way, enjoy the mentoring of these energies. And that's why I often say with my tarot, I tell people, look, you don't need to read the book immediately, but it's almost like if you were playing with dolls. Take my Empress and the devil, let's say, and say, well, what would the devil say to the Empress? And you don't have to know what the Empress means. And almost in that level, and this is what keyed me to the ancient Egyptians, because I had bought an Osiris and a couple of small Egyptian figures, and my daughters were very young, and I was going like this with Osiris, and I said, "Oh, Dad, you're Egyptian Barbies," and I went, Barbies? And then it struck me, I thought, wait a minute, that's really brilliant, because I thought when you're playing dolls, think of play, right? You're not making it up. You're not being a profound philosopher. You're not trying to, oh, I know what it means. You're doing more like what we do in rehearsal and acting, meaning you're just playing. You're trying to figure out, you're allowing yourself to be a nincompoop because you're going, look, this is a rehearsal. I don't know where this is going to go. It might fail completely, but let's enjoy it. Let's see what develops. And this approach, to consciousness, I found to be liberate. Almost like if you think about consciousness being, I don't contain me with your piety. Don't contain me with what you think I am. In other words, let's create a way of actually entering into a play, into a conversation. That's why I feel with drawing, when I do a Chi of painting class, I'm not teaching people how to paint, but actually how to breathe, how to reconnect with the body so that we trust that what is inside of us has relevance. Because this is another thing. We're dealing with a lot of psychology with words, when in fact, if we dealt with them like a labyrinth, like a pattern that we walked, that we would see I'm an operating system. That's what yoga understands. The human being is a psychological operating system. And that if we approach it as such, then we begin to say, I don't need to take everything personally. That was the help of the archetypes. I really felt that we are pressed up against the mirror of self-image, and therefore we can't differentiate. We can't hear the different voices. We don't realize we only hear the chaos without the differentiated voices. And I started there. So that's why the tarot is so instrumental for me, because it was the feeling that with each of the archetypes, like you think of a hub, right? That each one, in a sense, was a pushing outward, pushing into that character. And then the character, develops. And let's say the Empress, and then it's the Emperor. So then there's the seed of that idea that grows out until it emerges. And then after the 17 years of all of them doing that, it goes from being one at a time, or one voice at a time, to being what that analogy of the piano, of an instrument that is saying, look, you have, and we know this from astrology, in a natal chart, and this is why the tarot became relevant for me, because of Ed Steinbrecher and the inner guide meditation, because he used natal astrology, Jungian active imagination, and tarot archetype as a way of cultivating inner dialogue. Because I didn't want to have a passive experience. I wanted to gain access. I wanted to know, what are my tools? If we're going to explore consciousness, I want a tool set. And I don't want to just have a belief system. And that's what I do feel is my work was about. I'm a tool maker. Because at the end of the day, whether it's the hieroglyph of the human soul, thoughts, the library, the archetypes of tarot revisioned, or the Codex Tor, or the Watcher language, any of it, I realize is that as it flowed through me, it was to give it place and manifestation. But like an instrument, it was like building a piano that once built, it was, now how do you play it, Laura? How does he play it? How does it? Because these things want to be engaged. Think of an energy that said, I'm waiting for you to be curious about me, like a relationship, right? I've been longingly waiting for you to show interest in me. But I hear the blame. I hear the hate. I hear do you know, in other words, this, so if we think about etiquette, that is that question of how do we give ourselves permission to slow down and not ask what's wrong with the neighbor, but how, in what I love, do I feel a sense that I need to take care of this? I need to honor this. And I really want us to find in ourselves that tenderness, like with Laura, with Leigh. In other words, take care of these beings, whoever you are. This is such a remarkable gift. And the reason it is so profound is that it is so difficult. And I don't say that ironically. I say it because if we don't make sense of why we did this, and this is what my work really gets at, it gets at that we don't come from a state of non-knowing. We came from a state of absolute knowing. And we decided that to enter the question, and this is what Einstein helps us with. He said that reality is thought slowed down to a rate where we can perceive it. So we think of ourselves as a thought form, like, why have we slowed down? Why did we individuate to become Laura and Leigh? What is that in our story? And I really think that that's the gift. That's what this chair here is getting at, that when a person sits in Eve's chair and sees themselves in the mirror, the chair says, I've been empty for thousands of years. I've needed you to come home. I've needed you to realize that the escaping of the human struggle was never the point. We always wanted to, and we never could. So the alchemy, our arts, the beauty in spite of the death and difficulty, is the human story. That's why we're heroic. Not because we made some mistake and we're a bunch of fallen, evil, forgotten beings, but actually the opposite. A divine essence that loves so profoundly, it will not answer a question that it has not lived whole and holy, because to do so would be to answer from the outside. And our truth is always from the inside. We are artists of consciousness. And if we gave ourselves permission, it wouldn't be that, oh, I have to be the Leonardo of consciousness. But we'd realize, but I do need to develop some skill, because what I seek to know is not something that is a matter of entitlement. This is what the Hermeticists knew. They said, you do not necessarily even have a soul. A soul is not an entitlement. A soul is a seed. The soul says, how will you cultivate me? And if you don't love me, how can I grow? Do you see? And I think our love is deep, Laura, because when I'm working here, I feel so proud of this lost and lonely and anguished planet. Like, why? But if you think of a revelation that said, when you blossom, it will be yours. It will be yours because you've earned it, because you did not leave a stone unturned, because you not simply knew of the anguish of the world, you became the anguish. And because of that anguish, you decided this is not the story. Anguish like a storm is, but the passing of it will leave in its wake beauty. And Emerson said it best, for beauty is the creator of the universe. And when we know that, we return to our beloved. Finally, I'm convinced of it, having become worthy, not by having rejected, but by having allowed. Think of it. I don't get here by condemning others. I get here because I honor others, but I honor them like a librarian. I say, look, I don't agree with the authors of a lot of these books. I don't even like the art of many of the artists in these books, but that doesn't matter. They're still part of the conversation. And that's what Sophia teaches. She says, I'm matter, mater, mother. I'm the knowledge of your atoms. There are no evil atoms. If you don't like your stories, tell better stories. Begin with the story you're telling you about who you think you are, because you might be far more beautiful and meaningful if you would allow yourself. And I do feel that this is the problem with the mirror, is we're up against the mirror. I can't get anywhere. And like Dorothy, it's saying, honey, close your eyes. Okay, turn around. And as we turn around here, we're home. The journey away was to, like the plant, to take us from a seed form through that pressing against the earth, and I can't let anything out because I'm a bud and I'm just getting higher, and then we stop. And we don't know where we're going. And it just gets tighter and tighter until finally we let go. And I'm convinced that's what's going on. We're letting go, and it seems like madness, because what we're letting go of is the old way of resistance. But it's moving us into a different agreement field. And this is going to change from a type of linear to a nonlinear consciousness. And I just see it, that this is a type of seed that is being planted. Because meaning isn't something you can teach. It's something that's inspired. Because in a way, you'd say, what's our deepest meaning? It's when we discover ourselves. That's why when things are profoundly personal, they're often the most, in a sense, reflective of our greater humanity. And you think, well, why? That's because when it's deeply personal, it's about the truth of being human, not the escaping of that truth, but the honoring of it. And something in us knows that's the key. This idea that we need another planet is nonsense.
It is.
We only need another planet if we're 13 years old in our thinking.
Yeah.
But that's
It's just this amnesia. People
oh, yeah.
and the fear of that letting go.
Yeah.
And the taught to fear the dark, when it's the womb, when it's the creative cauldron, it's just whew. And you talk so, I mean, the archetypes that you bring to life through your tarot, the symbology, I mean, the symbolism is so profound in your deck. The most intricate deck I've ever come across. And I mean, and you just worked something new, the Navigator. It's your recent work, right? And what does this figure represent for you now, the Navigator? What kind of inner and outer navigator do you feel humanity is being asked to develop?
The navigator is really this sense of one's inner self as navigator. This is what came from the build the ark. The last flood was water, this flood is information. That if we go from seeing ourselves as land dwellers, meaning that I'm going from here to there, and therefore there's a logical path, into more, no, we're on water. So the same way as passing water, you have currents, and you're not, so you're always, in a way, tacking, you're adjusting. So you're beginning to think more like a navigator than in a way, you're seeing that whether think about a navigator as a type of sea captain, that it's that question of are the things on board with me, or are they in the water? I do have to navigate them. I do have to recognize whether or not I respond to this immediately because it's actually present, or whether it's simply something that is on the horizon but does not affect me directly. And that I do. I think the navigator in us is the cultivation of a type of inner ballast that isn't rejecting. This is what I say about the levels of my house, with the 3 levels. It's not rejecting any of the levels. It's not making, it's actually learning that if, like in the library, we are in the imagination, it is one conversation that it's a type of conversation that and inspiration that is freeing and inspiring in its own way. But we also then in the below have to deal with form, the black and white, the sense of how do we navigate the world. And then the same thing with how do we navigate the domestic space? How do we navigate the story of the people we love? And so that's what I feel the navigator is. It's that feeling that we are finally being asked to trust that the compass within us is the thing that needs to be honored.
I'm still here.
Oh, you are? Okay. I didn't know if you were still there. And
Oh yeah,
I
I'm going to turn my camera on just a second. So how, I mean, what's your creative flow? I mean, is this an everyday thing? Are you painting and writing pretty much every day?
yes. Yeah, I think that what is most essential, like another word for the hieroglyph of the human soul, is the wonder study. And I tell people when they visit, I say, look, when you visit, I've been cleaning and for probably 4 hours before you come, every time. And I clean every day. And so a lot of my, they say, chop wood, carry water, but a lot of my meditation is on really the custodial responsibility. I think of myself as a custodial artist at this point, meaning because it is an everyday revelation in the sense that it is like a musical composition where every phrase builds upon another phrase and it becomes ever more um, uh, really a living and breathing sentience. So everything it's very odd to be working on the hieroglyph of the human soul because I really do get the sense that until the day I leave the planet, I'll be working on it because it's about living not art as an object, but art as creation, as breath. This is part of why calligraphy was held to be sacred in traditional cultures because it captures breath. And let's say it's the Quran or a sutra, or as you're breathing, the spirit, the ruch, the soul is coming from the breath into the brush, into the pigment. So you'd say that the atoms are scintillating with the quality of spirit, and that as the pigment dries and it fixes the breath in paint. This is why in Western art we really have a very objective and optical understanding, rather than when we go back to ancient times. Sculptures were not about representing something or somewhere else. They were antennas. They were about creating places of coherence, of gathering, so that they would act to amplify relationship, not to represent something that's not there, but to actually be like a partner, that which cultivates a type of inner empathy and reveals truth not as something that is intellectual, but something that is energetic. And so a lot of the work is based in these other awarenesses that have come up from the process itself. In a sense, the education, like the calligraphy. So when people are here as well, I say, look, this is an act of love. It's an act of devotion. It literally has captured breath. So we are inside of a lung. If you think about being breathed, as I said with music, right? What does the library do? When you're inspired, but you're not inspired directionally, you're inspired really environmentally, ambiently, like when you're sitting in a garden, or your body feels it. It feels the expansiveness, and it feels held in that expansiveness. And it allows you to feel, in a way, a greater sense of interconnectivity. And that's why so much of what this is getting at when people come is, I say, the custodial element as well is, when you're here, allow yourself to be breathed. Allow yourself, like that we don't need to learn more. We need to let go more. We need to trust more. And that's part of the beauty and the multidimensionality of the hieroglyph of the human soul. It really does become a type of cosmic womb that is holding us with the human story, not to reject the human story. And that's why the mother's here, I'm convinced. She says, I love all of my books. I love all of my children. I don't give you the right to brutalize any of them for any reason. Think from a mom's point of view, right? Quit beating my kids up and thinking some are good for brutalizing and others are valuable. It doesn't work that way. Sort of like saying my pancreas is really good, but my heart not so much. It's like your body goes, wait a minute, what's this division going on? And that's you could say that's really like what the Zen and the art of anything was trying to do. Like, drop the hard focus, feel the soft focus, and from that, allow your vision to emerge. Because your hard focus will only see what you don't like. It'll be the reactive mind. And so everything becomes then about, again, the etiquette of energy, the sense of, well, how do I give myself permission to do this differently, to see differently? And then realizing that only ourselves can do that. And that's why I think, again, going back to the environment, it's so helpful, because if a person sits in Eve's chair and sees themselves, what's going on inside of them will be unique. I mean, people have cried, people have had, it's like you start to say, I've done my job. It's not to get in and interpret that for another person, but the realization that, what's been missing is place. What's been missing is, if it's not a beautiful story, why do we think it's the human story? Because isn't the human story that, in spite of all the darkness and difficulty, look at the beauty we've been able to at least allow, the music we've brought forth, the song, the dance, the sense of, even though we are going to die, let us love. Wow, what an amazing species. I mean, really, think about it. We are so locked into this vision that we no longer need to be beholden to. But the point is, it's so profitable for so many to keep people afraid of ever trusting themselves, ever feeling that there's something of real value going on inside of their heart. They're just linoleum. They're not gold. And this is the point of my work. Trust that linoleum. You weren't meant to be gold. That's another age. You were meant to be human. And that means whatever you're given, that's your paint set. And it's not that Van Gogh's supposed to paint like Cézanne, or Cézanne's supposed to paint like Michelangelo or like Winston Churchill. They all painted. And I just feel like, what do you do where you think, we came to this little world on the outskirts of nowhere to really explore the nature of consciousness without, in a way, the better idea intruding. That's how I could put it. So that we had to deal with what we were given. We had to use the pigments we were given. We had to use the anguish we were given, and to transmute it, not to escape it, but to make it something we valued and found of value, even though the world handed us mud. We sculpted it. We made it into something. And you know what? These other energies go, that's all I ask. Honor what you've been given. Who you are is beyond profound. You are at a point in time in human history that is beyond remarkable. You are billions of years old. You are being convinced of an optical illusion. And what I've discovered is when the optical illusion starts to fall away, who and what we are as beings is staggering. And it's not because we build faster jets or cleverer devices. It's because we back engineer and go, wait a minute. If my physicists now are saying, how do we create a bioorganic intelligence that's self-correcting, healing, and can develop its own capacity? Well, that's us. We're the outcome of that experiment. That's what this work is saying. And that's what my work with Tor, which I know is another conversation for another day, but Tor, my Codex Tor, goes back to 18.5 million years ago, and an elongated head, and a story that to know what it means to be human, we had to give up our cosmic knowing. In other words, we had to knock the obelisk down. If the antenna was up, we'd know too much. And that's also what Lilith taught me, that the age of the goddess, the age of the sacred, she says, if I'm outward, you would never believe you were separate. You would recognize the sacred nature within all things. So why did you turn the corner? Why did you turn away? And in this narrative, Lilith asks, or the goddess asks, and why did I not go away? Why did I disappear? Why did the mother go away? And what was it on this journey of self-reflection? And the Hopi say it best. They called it this the age of separation. But what does separation lead to? Reunion. And what's reunion? Is when we finally go, oh, I was waiting for someone else to do it. But it's like waiting for someone else to love for you. One. And it's not a big love. It's an intimate love. It's not a proving love. It's a being love. It's allowing love. And if no one believes you, close the door. Be the protector, the protectress of your heart. It's worth it. It's not up there for values that other people want to cast on it. If it is, no, thank you. That's what I feel about this art. I say, if you want to critique it, it's like critiquing my wife. You're really on dangerous ground. Meaning this is not up for opinion. Doesn't really matter. You don't like roses, you don't like roses, but that's not a conversation.
Right. Wow. Oh my goodness. I knew I was just gonna feel so uplifted talking to you. And it's just so interesting because Saturn and Neptune are going to be moving, or they already are, in Aries. That's interesting. The Mars energy, Saturn, instead of being like the lid, it seems like it's flipping to be the container of the multidimensional. And that feels like a really good shift.
Yeah.
But not everybody's necessarily going to feel into that. But what are your thoughts about just what's unfolding right now? And I know I could keep you here all day, and I don't out of respect for time. But yeah, maybe ending on that note, what do you see unfolding in humanity and any of these planetary shifts and changes that you've been noticing? Or
my work goes back a long time now to, as I said earlier, about notes on the emerging Renaissance, because I've always been very about Renaissance, because I realized Renaissance was not, or rebirth, was not that everyone got it or that there was a general, oh, now we see, but it was that those that it mattered to carried ideas that, because it mattered to them, they shared with one another. And they created a field of influence with one another. And from that, a freedom occurred in terms of approach that, or in a sense, a transition was allowed because individuals began to not react to what was going on, or I should say their reaction was to create a different way of seeing. And that's what I feel we're at now, is that I feel all of my work is about going back to first technology, paint and storytelling, but really to awaken what my book, Invitation to the Emerging Renaissance, is about, which is that the Renaissance is not, in a sense, like in general, everyone gets it, but that if you don't think about, and you can think about this like almost like let's say early rock and roll. It was something that was generating itself through individuals. And a lot of people didn't get it. They didn't like it. They were like, but it was motivating, like, well, wait, I'm hearing something different. And then other musicians picked up on it. And it became really that which allowed for a different expression through the creative act. And that's what my work, I feel, is a seed for, which is that it's not to teach, it's not to correct, it's to create resource. And that's what I do. I feel that if you want to know why I think this work mirrors an evolutionary pattern in human consciousness, is because for 45 years now, if I look downstairs, it's the 20th century and the work on the tarot, or I look at the ceiling up here at the paintings, right? They're going to be let me see if I can do it that way. Oh yeah. These go back to the 20th century as well. So there's that feeling that on the ceiling and on below there was this ascension upwards and this foundation downward. And then what happens with this room in between, beginning on 9/11, is that it's triggered to grow. And that's why, if you think about art being a message about our consciousness, it is saying that it's not that we are the technology. And that just like the Tuesday night and Thursday night groups I've had, these roundtables for almost 50 years now, is that if we think of the Grail story of Arthur and the Knights, the story is that the Grail is that which brings us together as an ideal that is not about claiming, but honoring. And in that honoring of the Grail, it brings all of us together with a sense that the vision we hold is not simply for ourself or our self-gain, but this larger circle, this larger wheel that together we create the possibility of a true engagement with divine, because we have not taken anything. We have sought to become worthy of what we seek to know. And that really has been the footprint here. And that's why I love that it has reached a point in this mosaic of my life that I can see it, that we needed to have the missing key of place. And that question of what is sacred. And when people come, I say, what's more sacred than where you live? What's more sacred than your children, than who you love, than your husband or your wife? That's where the sacred says, do you see how intimate it is? It's not down the street. It's not in that stone building. It's in your heart. So give this some place because it's with you all the time. So where are you going to give it a home? Or are you going to wait for someone else to say, no, I'm going to tell you where you can give it a home? We're not children. We are growing up. And I do feel like it's time to really not release your inner child. We've done that. We've done that really well. Now we're all brats. Let's release your inner parent, your inner guardian, the one that says, you know what? It's not responsibility for 2 hours a day, but 24 hours a day. And I know that's what really parents learn. In a sense, you learn this in life when you have responsibilities that you can't opt out of. You have to do it. And I think that when we don't have an escape valve, like I have to get out of it, but we commit to doing it, we're transformed because we've committed to doing it. And that's the art of it,
Yeah.
Because Dolly said it best, no artist, lazy artist, ever creates a masterpiece. And that's what I think about us as humans. I think we're a masterpiece of creation. I think we're an extraordinary example of consciousness. And that the reason it's so difficult is because we're learning to accept absolute responsibility.
So beautifully put.
Yeah.
Yeah. My gosh. What's before we close, I'm just so thrilled. I'm so grateful. Thank you for your time today, Leigh. It really
Oh,
means
thank
so
you.
much to me. What's the latest that you've done up in this area? I last time I was there, you had a bunch of mirrors and new things. So are you able to show us that or anything?
Actually, well, I'm trying to think if I could maybe walk. I don't know if I can walk around, but yeah, a lot of it is on growing and ongoing. So I've been I continue, and the narrative continues to evolve here, which is fascinating. And that I'll just see if I can walk around with this. Let me see if this will work or whether we'll be stuck to this. Hold on. If I can show you.
Also, your latest writings, are they accessible? Are you thinking of publishing?
Oh, wait, I just lost my, hold on. Um, yeah, did you see, did I come back? No, okay. I guess I can't unplug that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. Um,
Yeah. So what, I'm sorry, you asked the
oh yeah. So what new things have you been doing with the art, and are your unpublished writings going to be accessible to the public?
so I'd really like to make them accessible. I've got to figure out how maybe because I do have PDFs of the things I've been writing recently. I would like to also illustrate them with images from the hieroglyph and different things, but so that's really in process. I've got three books that I'm very excited about. The last one being Genesis Emergent, which is the sacred books of Olandar, and that's where I go into Adam Reborn. But I go to all of these texts that were pouring through me as I worked on Christ, on Sophia, on Kuan Yin, on these different figures, Lilith and Eve, and so so I'm very excited. I don't have something tangible right now, but I would suggest if people are interested in continuing the conversation that I do have a YouTube channel where I just posted a number of talks that my friend Patrick and I created on just different subjects. Because to me, it's about really sort of keeping oxygenated ideas and things that make us think, "Huh, that's possible." Because I feel like that's what breathes possibility into the conversation, into what we're doing. So,
Love your videos.
um,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and then my existing like my books like Tarot Revisioned is on Amazon if people, and I highly recommend that work in just in terms of creating keys that will help us move into asking questions that are relevant rather than distracting or in a way reactive, but help us really connect. So I'm always working, and I do I like on Facebook. As you know, I post a lot of just different things as well. So I'm out there, but I don't have a URL to get the books I've written yet, but I'd love to share
Oh, but
them.
you have so much. Um,
You know,
yeah, I'm going to share all the links for the books that you've put out there. I have them. They mean so much to me. They're just sacred texts that just that just pulse with life and activation. It's yeah, I've known you for 15 years. Is that right?
oh,
2010.
probably, yeah.
Yeah.
It all becomes, yeah, very
And
like
and it's sort of like before Lee, after Lee, like AD, BC, like like like
great.
like the biggest breath of fresh air.
Uh,
Um, yeah,
so
it just it's so immense. And
well,
so
I so admire your enthusiasm and aliveness and curiosity because I feel like that's the key to all of what's going on is trust no matter what or how we're approaching that the very in a way, the deeper yearning, the desire is the messaging. And I just really, I honor that because you are always showing up and always being curious, trying to help and share and cultivate people's thinking and hearts. So
well, thank
right
you.
back at you, Laura. Yeah.
Oh, well, I really look forward to connecting again soon. Send your love to Carla and your family. Send my love.
Definitely.
Um, and yeah, I highly recommend. It's the food for thought, and literally,
Yeah.
the last few videos that you did, I passed them around, and I could just see just the groundedness and the connection that people felt. Particularly, a lot of people are going through trauma. It's been a really traumatic last couple of years, and that
Yeah.
last video really was incredible. But I've been following you for so long that there's not one thing that hasn't just stunned me. And you when you go upstairs It's like every little detail. I mean, just on the floor, on the ground, on the bookshelves, it's so profound. It's so profound. Like every little bit of it. It's just everywhere you turn. It's just incredible. So
Yeah, I I do feel that it is an act of really of humanity seeking to remind itself that for all the darkness, we are that light. And the trauma, like you talked about, like I do talk about the creative, the creativity and trauma about, because all of this art in one way or another, which is another conversation, really does come out of different traumas and why it created great compassion that we really are in a state where we need to trust, but we need to also, I just feel so. Listen to the videos if you have a chance, or some of them, because I feel like the voice that whispers here isn't trying to have us do more or be more exhausted, but really I feel at times like it really wants to just give us a hug, like almost like I know how hard it's been. You're carrying all of that, not just what you think you are, but the long journey, and it's not been a happy one. It's had marks of joy, but it's been profoundly difficult. And if we honor it, not to escape it, but to recognize it, I think it'll let the flower blossom.
the reunion, it
Yeah,
really seeks to bring us closer to ourselves, not further away. And that's what I
yeah.
love.
That's the gathering, right? Yeah, yeah. So good.
Aw. Well, thanks again, Leigh. So good to see you. Happy New Year, everything. Much
Yeah,
love.
and you too, to you and your family, and just infinite inspiration. We are here on this world, I'm convinced, because we really wanted to explore consciousness, not because it was given to us, but because we had to find it. And in the act of rediscovering it, we would discover our true humanity.
Yes. Gosh, it's beautiful to be alive and be
Yeah,
human.
yeah, that's the art
Aw.
of
Yeah.
it. Thank you, Laura, so much.
Thank you so much, Leigh. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Me too.
Okay.
Bye bye.